Mushroom Wonderland.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Aaron Hilliard from Mushroom Wonderland. I'm the vice president of the local Mycological Society. I've been foraging mushrooms like most of my life, and so what I do on a lot of these videos is I just walk out into the forest and see what kind of mushrooms are growing. So right now it's the beginning of June 2022 in Western Washington, and it's beautiful. It's actually like 72 degrees right now, which is a good temperature to stimulate a lot of mycelial growth and some of the fungus. So we're just gonna go on a walk and see what kind of mushrooms we encounter walking down this trail in a county park, kind of near where I live, and see what's growing out here, see what's interesting. Maybe we can find something to eat. I'm always carrying a backpack with like a plastic bag in it in case I run across something, but I'm not really out in search of anything in particular. Just curious what might be growing out here in the beginning of, basically the beginning of summer. It's really late spring, and let's see if there's any interesting or cool mushrooms growing out here. So if you're new to the channel, hit subscribe, check out some of the other videos. There's also playlists of mushroom identification and a playlist of foraging videos just like this. So if you just want to veg out and learn a lot of mushroom IDs, that's kind of what I'm into, is identifying these mushrooms. Kick back, relax, and hit that like button and leave a good comment, and come with me into the woods, me and my dog Gunnar, and let's go see what kind of mushrooms are growing out here in June 2022. Come on. Start coming down the trail, and I look down to my right. Look at that guy. Little morel growing. Another one of these morels just growing in the conifer forest. So it's pretty well done. It's pretty experienced. But this is a true morchella. This one's probably still okay to eat. If I look right here, there's another one that's, oh, it laid down and died. And then there's one more little guy right there. So little morels just popping up everywhere this year. You can see the salal and needle duff just on the side of a trail. A lot of mushrooms seem to like the edges of trails like this. And morels are no exception. They really seem to like disturbed ground, and these are good eating. The way you can tell it's a true morel is, well, it's got a very unique kind of pattern on the cap with the little pits and grooves and ladder systems, but the cap and the stem are all one piece, and it's hollow inside there. And this one was a good edible maybe a few days ago, a little beyond its prime right here, but beautiful little find here in June in Western Washington. In June here in Western Washington, not the most mushrooms. Fall is definitely the best time to be foraging for mushrooms out here, but there's always fungus growing wherever there's moisture, and so we've had a lot of spring rain, but it's starting to get pretty warm, so they're a little farther and fewer between, but I think we're gonna see some cool mushrooms out here today. See this tree over here on the edge of this little pond. It's catching my eye. Beautiful, beautiful spot down here. These skunk cabbages really stink like skunks out here. But growing on this tree right here, pretty sure I can spot some oyster mushrooms. So it's pretty swampy. I'll see if I can get there. There we go. Made it. There's more growing up there, and some growing way up at the top. But these are known as oyster mushrooms, Pleurotus ostreatus. So look at the bottom of that. You can see the gills go all the way down to the bottom. That's indicative of an oyster mushroom. These are really good edibles. They smell a bit like anise or like licorice. This is a nice little fruiting, young ones. So they're always growing on the side of a dead log or a dead tree, like these dead red alder right here. Some nice ones up there. We could use this long stick and maybe dislodge them, but I'm gonna pick these and collect them. I have a little recyclable bag in my backpack that I'll use to collect them in. Didn't really expect to find anything worth keeping, but these fresh spring oysters definitely worth keeping today. So I'm gonna pick these. See that? Score. Oh, good find. All right, back into the conifer woods. Whoa, big bumblebee. Maybe a bumblebee nest. Look at this. There's a down log here with all these mushrooms growing on it. Popping all out of the dead wood. So there's certain mushrooms that always grow on wood. Helps to be able to identify them. These ones have a really dark stipe, kind of a brown caramel colored cap. I would be nervous that these are like Galerina marginata or the funeral bell, but they are very close looking to these. These are known as Kuehneromyces, and these are an edible species of mushroom. Although I'm not going to pick them. I mean, by the time you picked, whatever, 25 fruiting bodies that are on this little log, they would cook away to like a tablespoon of mushrooms, you know. And they are not for the novice mushroom enthusiast, because they do look a lot like Galerina marginata. But Kuehneromyces got these really tight little gills. Some people would call them an LBM, just a little brown mushroom, because they're sort of tough to distinguish amongst other little brown mushrooms. So, I mean, you could collect those, and then they're pretty prolific this time of year. So you could probably, on a hike, you know, find enough to make a little meal of. But be careful, they're not Galerina. Look at this guy. Devil's Club. That stuff is gnarly. And I'm wearing some shorts right now, so I do not want to bump into the Devil's Club. It's a beautiful plant, though, medicinal. Natives used it for all kinds of things back in the day. Nice little stand of Devil's Club right here. So this is kind of interesting, something you might not pay much mind to, but I find it interesting once I discovered what this is all about. So see how this log is like rotted in these like cubical stacks. It's weird, like how it's all broken apart in like cubical stacks. And what that is from the Hypomyces monsier or the red-belted conch. Those type of mushrooms are called brown rot decayers. And what they do is they eat all the white cellulose, all the white matter out of the wood, and they leave behind just like cubical stacks of whatever's left over, all of this brown wood. So I guess that's why they're called a brown rot decayer, because they just eat the white stuff, which is kind of confusing that way. But when you see logs like this, they look like they're stacked up neatly. That's because all of the white cellulose that was binding the wood together was chewed away by those type of fungus, brown rot decayers. So pretty cool. Oh wow, look at these. Beautiful. Little slime molds maybe, I'm not sure. And right here a little mycena. As we look on the end of these logs up here, good examples of those brown rot decayers I was talking about. The red-belted conch, you can see the red belt on there. This one is called Hypomyces monsiae, common one growing on the logs down here in the northwest. Conifer logs, so it's eating all that white cellulose out of those trees. Probably the most common mushroom here in the northwest that you see, macro fungi anyways. Hypomyces monsiae. Oh, there's a very big one down there. Some people think them to be medicinal, so you could look more into that and go pick some and maybe make a tea and maybe cure what ails you. Watch out for bees nests out here. Bees nests are in the ground a lot of the time. Yellow jackets, you do not want to step on one of their holes. You will be in bad shape. Definitely a good time to keep your eye out for bees. And there's some litter. We'll pick that up. Here's a couple of cute little mushrooms. These would fall in the genus Mycena, no doubt. Mycena, it's a huge genus of little mushrooms, little forest mushrooms that have white spores, and so very delicate. You see those ridges are made from the gills underneath actually, and they're just super little. Very cute. So a lot of these little tiny white spored mushrooms are known as Mycenas. You got to be a real expert to narrow down all the different Mycenas. Following my dog into this meadow of sword fern and bracken fern, and I look down and here's this stick in the trail, and this one has a bunch of these little orange jelly things. Let's see, there we go. Guepinlopsis alpina, or alpine jelly cones. I've heard the poor man's gumdrop, which, like, you gotta be pretty poor if you can't afford a gumdrop. If you're out eating, you know, essentially mold off of sticks in the forest, maybe you don't need to be worrying so much about gumdrops. I don't know. But yeah, Guepinlopsis alpina. My phone is having a hard time focusing, but cute little guys. They're orange, and they have little stems and caps, just like real mushrooms. So if you're ever super downtrodden and down on your luck and all you need is a gumdrop, head to the forest. They're always growing on a little stick like this. I rarely see them on a stick any bigger than an inch around. Anyways, moving on. All right, so I've seen this a couple times today. I just picked this one out and set it like this, but look at how odd and crazy this looks. I believe this was a Xerocomellus, and then it was attacked by a Hypomyces of some type. It's definitely a parasite. That's the white stuff, that white frosting looking stuff is another fungus that's growing and consuming this bolete. So probably a Xerocomellus zellerii or atropurpureus. I'm not sure which one, but yeah, this is definitely being consumed by a parasitizing mushroom known as Hypomyces, and it's really odd looking. So if you're seeing this going on, it's just the perfect conditions this time of year for the Hypomyces to be eating on whatever bolete type mushrooms they see growing out here. And then how weird is this? This catches my eye, and look at this. This is a cap of some kind of a bolete. Look at how rough it is. I want to say that this is actually a Boletus fibrillosus, young one. I've never known them to grow in spring. Man, look at how ridgy that cap is. So I don't know. This is something unusual to me. Definitely got that poor surface underneath there. And I don't know where the stipe is. It got kicked by something. So we're going to keep our eye out for more of this craziness. Had to have been related to that. What do you think, boy? Fibrillosis? Or atropurpureus that's very deformed, very bumpy. That's probably what it is. Anyways, gonna keep an eye out for more of that. Coming along, these catch my eye, growing right here on this obviously very old rotting wood right here. Look how pretty those little things are. So these are actually not mushrooms in the traditional sense. These are actually a lichen, it's known as Lichen umbellifera. What a beautiful name, but they're very umbilicate. You see, they got that hole in the middle, like a belly button. I guess that's why they would call it umbilicate. The gills are quite decurrent. They're running down the stem like that. The stem is actually called the stipe, but these are actually the fruiting body off of a lichen, and it resembles a little mushroom. But if you were to look down here at the base of it with a microscope, you'd see that it's just it's a lichen that's growing off the wood, not a fungus so much. So anyways, this camera can't focus quite that tight, but beautiful little guys always growing on the side of wood like this. Edibility unknown. This guy, he just doesn't care what I'm doing. Lichen umbellifera. Beautiful, beautiful name. Beautiful time of year. Just gorgeous out. Look right down here, this big blob of a thing, this big rusty thing right here. This is known as the Dyers Polypore, Phaeolus schweineitzi, and this is last year's fruiting. Look how rusty colored it is, but this is actually prime for somebody who dyes fabric with mushrooms. So you can dye fabric, usually a protein fabric like silk or wool. Takes the dye really well, and you can pick this mushroom and boil it with water and then soak your fabric in there. And this, even though it's rusty brown colored, it would most likely leave a green color on your fabric, and you could add different mordants to change the color by changing the pH and the acidity and all of that. But the Phaeolus schweineitzi, or the ever popular Dyers Polypore, it's always growing at the base of a dead stump like this, you know. I always find it on dead wood. So this can actually be a parasitic mushroom too and kill trees, but more often than not I find it just chewing on trees that are already dead. So if I was a dyer, I'd be excited about seeing this. I'm going to leave this one behind and carry on. This one's kind of interesting. It's nasty because it's dog poo, and there's this fuzz growing on the dog poo. You might recognize that. This actually has kind of a funny story. It's called Hypomyces blakesleyanus, and it was named after a mycologist who was spiteful at a different mycologist named Blakesley, and so he named this fungus that grows on dog shit Hypomyces blakesleyanus after that other mycologist, so that he would forever be known as a pile of dog shit. So there you go, Hypomyces blakesleyanus. Probably don't want to eat that one. I'm not sure if it's edible or not, but I would strongly recommend avoiding that. This is a beautiful like wetland area. There's a big pond out here and conifer forest all surrounding it. So if you know of an area like this, this is a good one. A good mix of deciduous and coniferous and all kinds of different decaying matter for mushrooms to grow on. There's even a spot up here that's got a bunch of wood chips scattered everywhere. So those are always a fun place to look for mushrooms because it's like concentrated mushroom food. So we're heading towards the wood chips, see what's growing over there. Here I am on this trail with the wood chips, and what do I encounter first but a large mushroom. Look at this spongy surface underneath here. It's got this kind of red striation on the stipe. See how it's kind of this red color. That one's very indicative to me. It looks kind of like the color of rhubarb. This one's got pretty big pores. It would almost look like a Suillus, but it's just really old and mature, and the top is all sun faded. But this one is a Xerocomellus zellerii, most likely, because it's got a little bit of a slender stipe for how big the cap is on that. So Zellers Bolete, this one's an edible boletus that grows here in Washington State and all over the Pacific Northwest. And it's got this spongy pore surface underneath there. But like I said, this one's a little past its prime, definitely full of worms and larvae. So I would avoid eating this one, but young ones you could definitely eat. And I think there were small young ones that we saw that were getting parasitized by that Hypomyces. So this one is a mycorrhizal mushroom. So it's growing in association probably with these western hemlock that are right here. There's a Douglas fir over there. And it's like in the wood chips as well for some extra nutrition. So the Zellers Bolete, growing in the beginning of June. Interesting. You see some mushrooms kind of boiling out of the wood chips right here, right on the side of the trail. Mushrooms like to grow in disturbed areas like this, and these ones growing on dead wood. Oh, you can see how brightly colored it is underneath there, real fuzzy kind of cortina. See on the edge of the margin, that fuzz? That was a protective veil until the gills were ready to drop some spores. That veil stays over the gills and protected while that process is happening. Pretty neat. These are in the genus Hypholoma. So these ones are Hypholoma fasciculari, or the Sulfur Tuft. This is a toxic mushroom, so definitely one you want to leave behind. It does have a relative, the Hypholoma capnoides, which I think is a pretty good edible. But these ones will definitely make you wish you hadn't eat them. Look at the cool white rhizomorphs there on the bottom of the stipe. That's the mycelium itself of the mushroom. And a beautiful example of cortina. It's going to have a dark purple-brown spore print, kind of like psilocybe, but definitely no fun when you eat those. So, Sulfur Tuft. Here in the wood chips, we come across a whole bunch more of the Kuehneromyces. So they could look a little bit like Gallerina. They have these really dark stipes, though. There's a pretty prolific little flush of them growing along the edge of this trail. So these are edible, and you could pick these and eat them. Gunnar, he loves just walking through the mushrooms, but very rhizomorphic on the bottom of that stem too. From the top, how hygrophonous they are, like this, could make you think of a psilocybe mushroom, but not so much. So yeah, could collect these. I'm not gonna today. Come out of these trails that are made of wood chips into this meadow made of wood chips into these massive piles of wood chips. So these are areas where I will often look, see what kind of mushrooms are growing, because oyster and wood chips, they love it. So over here, perfect example of what I'm talking about. All these young Hypholoma. Oh yeah, a nice cluster of them down there. So they're eating up these wood chips. And although these are poisonous sulfur tufts, they could as well just be psilocybe mushrooms or gymnopolis mushrooms or whatever. So check out the wood chips. We love us some wood chips. More and more all around the edge where the chips have been less disturbed and they're just a little bit older. All this tractor activity won't let mycelium establish itself, but pretty cool. Cool. You can tell it's got this rusty spore print. So Gymnopilus have a whoa, Gunnar stepped on a pokey or something. You okay, bud? Must have stepped on a thorn, but the Gymnopilus has a rusty reddish orange spore print, and like growing in these wood chips. So look at that. Look at all that mycelium tangled on here. I could really take this home and try to cultivate it. And you can see that cobwebby cortina right there. Really rusty orange colored. And then that stipe is kind of purple colored. The cap is sort of yellow, but it'll turn purple. So these are beautiful mushrooms growing here in the spring and in the fall. There was some pins coming up right here that got all dried out, but the Gymnopilus luteifolius, these ones are pretty sunburned, but definitely growing here in the wood chips in the springtime. So cool to see that. These are a mildly active species. These actually contain psilocybin, the same active ingredient in magic mushrooms that you would buy in the parking lot of a Grateful Dead concert. So they're said to be weaker and extremely bitter, but the Gymnopilus luteifolius, a mildly active species that grows here on wood chips and off of dead wood and rotting logs and stuff like that. So cool. Here's some others that are growing right near in the same wood chips, and these ones are a lot more kind of fleshy colored. You can see it's got this big ring that attaches here. It's actually just tearing away, so the margin stays stuck to the stipe. And there's a bunch of them growing right here. And when they get a little dried out, they get really cracked looking like that. Very indicative of a very common spring mushroom here in the Pacific Northwest. This is known as the agrocybe praecox, or the Springfield cap. So this one you could eat. It's edible. It's not dangerous or nothing like that. But yeah, it's always got this attached veil. As it gets older, this thing will just disintegrate into nothing. And sometimes you won't even be able to see it anymore, but they definitely crack like that when they get dried out. So the agrocybe praecox, or agrocybe praecox. And we've got some really interesting looking mushrooms here. Look at the size of this guy. It's big. Looks like one of the big mushrooms you'd see in the grocery store. My father-in-law would call this a portobello, although that's not what it is. This one is a Pleuteus. So you can see it's got these white gills, but it's going to have really pink spores. It's got this almost metallic looking goldish bronze colored kind of cap, and real kind of wrinkly, and it's just a real heavy hardy mushroom. They're really healthy growing in these wood chips, but usually growing out of dead wood in the forest. The Pleuteus cervinus group, also known as the deer mushroom. Not so much because deer like to eat them, but I guess it's because when you put them under a microscope, the cystidia or something like that has antler looking little appendages on it, so they look like a deer, I guess. So anyways, but you could eat that. It's edible, although not really prized. So the Pleuteus cervinus. If you look here, here's a interesting ascomite. This one might look familiar. You often see this like growing on trash. You can see it growing in on like piles of wet cardboard and stuff. This one is known as Peziza. So there's quite a few different species of the Peziza cup fungi, but you know, you got to have a microscope to really see the differences in the species. So we'll just call it Peziza species, but there's a few of them growing right here. And in a cup fungi, these are ascomites, just like the morels. So they grow spores in things called asci, and the asci actually shoot the spores out into the air. And kind of like the morel, if you disturb one of these, you can sometimes see little spores go flying, but I'm not holding a very steady camera right now. But yeah, these are pretty common, and you know, they're edible. They're not going to hurt you if you were to eat the Peziza cup. And then we look over here on the on the wood chips. And look at this, just a ton of these kind of brownish, orangey brown sort of mushrooms. You can see the younger ones are a lot lighter colored. They're all growing together, and then underneath, one thing I'm looking for is the color in these gills right here. These ones are kind of yellowish looking. This could look like a sulfur tuft, but I can see the spore print in here. It's not this dark purple brown spore print. This is a more of a light brown, kind of a milk chocolate brown, so like Foliota brown I call it. So these are the Foliota spumosa group, and these ones will fruit in the fall and in the spring. I don't know anybody that goes out trying to pick these to eat them. They grow in huge quantities like this, but they're probably not poisonous. You probably could eat these if you want, but they decay away so fast and turn into these big nasty piles of just old mushrooms. So the Foliota spumosa, this one grows fall and spring, so it just likes eating some wood chips like that. Often can be found on dead logs and stuff like other Foliota species. Right here alongside the trail, look like a golf ball is laying here in the moss, but it's definitely not. That's also not one of those sculpted puff balls that you see in the mushroom guides. This one's a button of an amanita, although it can look like a sculpted puff ball. This one, if you cut it in half, it would definitely have all the characteristics of an amanita. You can see the big bulb down here and the stem. So this one's either Amanita pantheranoides or the Amanita aprica. It's just too young to tell. There's not even any color showing. But in either case, it's a toxic mushroom, and some people try to derive some sort of medicinal quality from them. Oh, check that out. There's one. Amanita pantheranoides, the West Coast panther cap. So it does contain muscimol and iobotanic acid, which is toxic for the human system. But it can be used as a type of deliriant of sorts. I wouldn't even call it a hallucinogenic, but I don't mess with them. Probably safe to leave them alone. Look over here in the woods, kind of near the trail. We see this guy popping up out of the brush. Look at that. So another one. It's got these white spots on the cap. Looks a lot like that Amanita pantheranoides, except for the color of it is very much different. It's kind of an orangish yellow color, maybe an apricot color. This one is in the family of amanitas as well. You can see it's got those same characteristics on the stem. It's got that ring, it's got the white gills, and so it's kind of falling apart, but it's going to have a white sport print too. And this one is another relative of the Mario mushroom, Amanita muscaria. This one is known as the Amanita aprica, and kind of fitting for that color that it has there. So consider this one toxic as well. This family of amanitas that grow here in the Pacific Northwest, most of them are no good to eat. These ones containing the same kind of toxins that the Amanita pantheranoides and the Amanita muscaria will have, and could cause serious gastric upset. And so Amanita aprica, a real pretty apricot colored stem with a bunch of these warts persistently kind of fused into the cap. Pretty easy ideas, you know, pretty easy to identify. And then you look over here, growing right next to it, another mushroom, kind of a bigger one, and it's got these brown spore prints and stuff. This one is going to be also the agrocybe praecox, the same ones that we just saw in the wood chips over there. So they look a little bit different depending on what kind of environment you find them in. Sometimes you find them and they're really big and hardy, and sometimes you find them and they're just tiny and wimpy. But agrocybe praecox, super duper common one in the spring here. And look, there's no sign of a ring on this one, even though it definitely had all that stuff dangling off the edge of the cap here. So agrocybe praecox, Springfield cap. Oh, we got something growing here. Oh, that's done long dried out. That's really old, a really old black-footed polypore, Kitsap Peninsula. Another one that likes to grow on the little sticks and stuff. So these grew last fall and they're just like woody, you know, they're very, very tough. So some of these have been around for months and months. Probably let off a billion spores. Oh, right down here. See this kind of maroon colored looking brain thingy? This one is a pretty common spring mushroom here in the Pacific Northwest. It's going to have this maroon colored cap, and then the stem is often sort of a gray color. Sorry, let me focus there. So this one happens to be solid, but sometimes the stems are hollow. But this is known as the Gyromitra esculenta. So this is a poisonous mushroom. Some people call it a false morel. It's in the Ascomycota, so it's in the same type of mushrooms as morels, really, but this one contains a compound called Gyromitrin, metabolized in your system as monomethylhydrazine. So hydrazines are very volatile compounds. They discovered monomethylhydrazine in World War II, and they would actually propel rockets of war with them. So imagine that. That's a propellant in your stomach now. It causes all kinds of nervous system problems and seizures, vomiting, diarrhea, and even death. So leave this one alone. Common one. You might see this one growing around your house, but a good one to just leave alone. This is the Gyromitra esculenta. So it's beautiful out here today. Birds are chirping. The sun is shining. The wind is kind of blowing a little bit. But we mainly have two mushroom seasons in Washington. We have one in the spring, typically from like April, March, April, and May. We have a smattering of mushrooms that grow in the summertime, even some good edible mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, and chicken of the woods mushrooms grow in the summertime. And you can also find some chanterelles around here in the summer. And then fall is like the mushroom season. That's when most mushrooms are growing. And so right now we're kind of like dwindling on the tail end of a lot of spring mushrooms. All the ascomites, like the Morchella or the morel species, kind of coming to an end here in Western Washington. Now you kind of have to shift to the east side of the mountains here in Washington State or in Oregon and work your way into the elevations, because it's starting to get a little too warm down here. They only want the ground temperature to be about 55 degrees, about 50 to 55 degrees for a couple weeks. That's when they're fruiting good. And when it stays warm for longer than that, the mycelium's growing like crazy, but not a lot of fruit going on. So yeah, we're dwindling out of spring mushroom season. Mushrooms are going to get a little bit more scarce as we go into summer, but there's always enough here in Washington. Luckily, we get enough rain that we can keep the videos going. Oh wow, check out this stick. Got a lot of this tremella growing on it. So they cultivate this in China, growing off of some sterium, it looks like. So tremella. Oh, look at that slimy globular mess. But this is a good edible mushroom, and they cultivate these in China in huge orange blobs. But it's a perfect example of it parasitizing a sterium. Hey everybody, so thanks a lot for joining. Hope you got some value out of that video. If it's fun to just learn about some mushrooms and walk out in the forest with me and my doggy. And thanks for joining Mushroom Wonderland. We'll see you on the next video. Much love, everyone. Peace.